Hello and welcome to another professional development training from Coleman University. This time we're looking at classroom data, how we use it for analysis and to help our planning to create better instruction. Today's lesson will explore some of the reasons that we collect data and what kind of data we actually should collect from our classrooms. We'll look at some ways to analyze the data at a very simple level. And finally, we'll look at how data can be used to improve our planning process. So let's beg the question, why do we in fact collect data? Opinions are like sphincters. We all have one and they all stink. Just because I have an opinion of what's going on doesn't mean that I'm automatically right, whether I'm a CEO or whether I'm the person down on the shop floor or the teacher in the classroom. What I need to do is collect data so that I can look for trends that maybe I missed, or look for relationships that I wasn't aware actually existed between what I did and the outcomes that I achieved. So this data can provide a number of things for us. It can tell us if we need to shift the direction we're moving our class or try something different. It can justify what we're currently doing so it isn't changed just because of someone else's opinion. It may give us a whole new insight as to what's actually occurring in our classroom, how doing A affects B and how B affects C. And it allows us a chance to do some mid-course corrections. If what we're doing isn't working, we don't keep doing it. That's a sign of insanity. Instead, we try to find when it's not working and then come up with a different solution to that given problem. All right, let's say that you buy into the fact that data can be helpful. Does that mean that I collect every single piece of data that I can find? Do I put everything online so that I automatically have the big data that I can simply pull special relationships from, or do I collect just the final term grades? What is it that's important? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, not everything is of equal worth. Not everything is worth actually collecting. What you have to look at is what you're trying to do. What decisions must you make in the classroom? What decisions must you make in curricula? What decisions you have to make regarding activities in the classroom? Here is just a quick sample of some of the possibilities at different levels within the university and the types of things we can measure. If I'm looking at a program, yes, I can measure the GPA and I can find out which program has smarter students as indicated by GPA and which don't. I'll show you an example a little bit later on of how I can use GPAs to assess instructors and the rigor that they bring to their classrooms. There's all sorts of possibilities here. You don't have to collect everything, but you do have to collect the data that's going to help you make better decisions. So what are some of these decisions that you as a classroom instructor need to make on a daily or weekly or per term basis? Probably the most important one is, are my students actually getting to those course outcomes? Are they achieving the learning they need to achieve? If you look at a shorter term level, something like I just gave a quiz, are there bad questions on the quiz? Well, I'll show you a very quick way in Moodle that you can determine that. Are there things that the student should know before they get into my classroom but don't? Is there a particular pattern to the reason that students suddenly disappear early or don't arrive on time? Sometimes it's something simple like the bus schedule doesn't align with the classroom hours. Whatever it may be, it's important for us to look at this and try to figure out what's going on behind the scenes. And that's where data really can open our eyes to some of the possibilities. We'll talk about grade distribution and why that's important in just a minute. Moodle offers many benefits when it comes to data collection. Whether you're using it as a companion site or you're actually teaching online with it, by doing things like putting your quizzes in Moodle, you're able to use some of the tools that Moodle has embedded within it. One of the most critical when it comes to assessing an examination is the item analysis. Now, the pictures you're seeing in front of you are from an earlier version of Moodle. This was the 1.9 version, and we're currently on the 2.2. You'll see, as a handout in the course here, an updated version with some of the new requirements for how to get this particular report from Moodle. You get the same basic data whether you're looking at the 1.9 version or the 2.2 plus version, so let's kind of focus on what we're seeing here. When you're looking at questions on a quiz, there are going to be some that are very difficult, there are some that are very easy. How do you determine which is which? Academic research has said that when I'm looking at a question, if the majority of the class got it, by that I mean 100 to 70%, it's an easy question. If between 69 and 30% of the class got it right, it's a moderately difficult question. And if less than 30% of the class got it right, it's a difficult question. This is a very helpful report because it allows you to QA your answer key, for instance. If you look and almost all the students have answered a different response than what you said was a correct response, maybe your key is wrong. Or maybe the question is worded in such a way that it misleads the students. Or perhaps you have two different answers that kind of evenly split 50-50 between the students. Again, it could be that the question stem is worded badly, or perhaps there are two answers, either of which could be the right one. By looking at these kind of analyses, it is very easy for you to determine what's going on in your quiz before you have to go back and actually talk to the class. You can use data to determine whether or not your students are meeting course outcomes. One of the most important steps in this process is to make sure you're assessing them properly. I can't use bad data to try to make a good assessment. So when you're looking at the course outcomes, what are the Bloom's verbs? If the Bloom's verb says explain XYZ, I can't use a multiple choice question. There is no explanation there. I am recalling or I'm recognizing. I potentially could be evaluating perhaps, but I sure as heck am not explaining anything by selecting A, B, or C. So in your classroom, you need to build activities that are in their outcomes expressed in the same way that Bloom's verb tells you to do so. So if I'm looking at an assignment where it is based on an outcome that says the student will explain XYZ, then I have to ask myself, well, how am I going to have them explain this? Will I have them explain it in writing? Will I have them explain it orally? Will they do a presentation? Will they do it as a group? Will they argue it as if they were two lawyers? It really doesn't matter. You just have to come up with a way where they're forced to explain. Once you have that method, then you can look at the resulting metrics and use that data, that outcome, to determine whether the course outcome is met. If you do that, it's much easier to justify to anyone, whether it's someone from the accrediting agency, your associate dean, a fellow instructor, whomever, that you are in fact reaching the educational outcomes that you promised the student on day one when they entered your class. One of the difficulties, especially in a school that doesn't have a lot of prerequisites, and one of the complaints that we hear all the time is our students aren't ready, our students can't write, our students can't do math, our students don't know Linux, our students don't know how to do this, they don't know how to do that, yada, 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 yada. Well, if I'm building a class whose foundation is that the student must understand a certain topic or bring to the table a certain skill set, no matter how good I am as an instructor, I am destined to fail if those students do not have the prerequisite knowledge. So before you move into a course, you may want to collect data as to how prepared the students are for your class. You can do pre-tests. The moment they walk in the classroom, for day one, hour one, you hand them a test, or you have them go online and you check to see, do they actually know the things they're supposed to know before they get into my classroom? How can you expect a student who can't speak English, let alone write it, to give you a 10-page paper in APA format without any mistakes? You simply can't. So you need to check and see what their readiness to learn actually is before they get into your classroom. If you don't want to go to the trouble of doing pre-tests, you can simply, during the course of a classroom discussion, ask a number of questions that relate to the prerequisite knowledge. If they're popping along and they're giving you all the answers, you know the class is ready to go, or at least the majority of the class is ready to go. On the other hand, if you're asking these general questions that they should have at the tips of their fingers, and you're getting that deer in the headlight look back at you, you know you're going to have to go in and do a little sort of reteach or pre-teach before you get into your new topic. They're not ready. If you want to get real tricky, you can even build in certain questions in your examinations, in your quizzes that you would have normally in the class that relate directly back to the prerequisite knowledge. And then compare how well did they do on the questions in the material that I covered as opposed to the questions I didn't cover that were supposed to already be existent knowledge within the student. And if it turns out that the pre-existing knowledge isn't there, that again gives you an indicator that you're going to have to change your teaching, add in the lower level material to make sure your students can achieve the outcomes for your course. But without the data, you're just shooting in the dark. You have no idea what it is you're supposed to do or why your students are failing. We keep track of absences for a number of reasons, many of which relate to federal funding or state approval or accrediting agency approvals. That's all fine and dandy, and yes, we should do it. But instead of simply saying that they're present or absent, let's look at the patterns. What's actually happening here? If a student begins to leave early and leave early and leave early and leave early, that's telling us, for whatever reason, this student has something else going on. There's something outside the school that's causing difficulty. Maybe the babysitter is leaving early, or the bus has to be met at a certain time, or work starts, whatever it may be. Or that maybe they're getting bored in class, or they're getting confused and they have no idea what to do. Either way, the fact that you're seeing an absence pattern tells you that there's a red flag over that student's head saying, talk to me, find out what's going on. Don't let me keep drifting until I finally disappear. Well, I said we'd get back to grade dispersions, and sure enough we have. Grade dispersions are a way of measuring the rigor or the amount of difficulty in a classroom. Is the teacher making the student earn the grade, or is the teacher simply handing the student an A for showing up every day? One of the best ways to do these grade dispersions is in a box and whisker plot. It basically takes a normal bell curve, takes all of the metrics that we would get, the descriptive statistics, and lays it out very concisely in one sort of overhead visual. So if you look at this box and whisker plot on the left, take that bell curve and just rotate it along the axis until you're looking from on top straight down, and that's what you see with a box and whisker. On the right, you'll notice a number of box and whisker plots. These were actually from a college that will remain nameless, but it was for an actual term. Now remember, at Coleman, anything below 70% is failing. So our area for focus really is from that red line, the 70%, to the 100% on the right. You see there's a lot of difference here depending on who's teaching. If you look at the fifth instructor from the bottom, it's only a dot. The mean, the median, the mode, the outliers, everything all falls on top of each other, which means every single student in that instructor's class got 100%. Not a single point was lost during the entire term. Would you say that's a difficult instructor? I don't think so. That's a gimme. We're not paying instructors to hand out grades. We're teaching instructors to teach and then to hold students accountable for learning. And one of the ways we do that is through the use of grades. If you look at the second instructor down from the top, that's a pretty good distribution. Notice no one has really gotten an A, and very few people have failed, but there's a nice even layout of 50% of the students, roughly from about a B- to an A-. Looks very good. The median and mean markers are about lined up, which means it's a fairly even normal distribution. It's not skewed in one direction or another. Nice pattern. That's something that we should be looking for to see, are my teachers in fact being rigorous in their grading? So no matter what kind of data you're collecting, whether it's data on your grading or student learning outcome achievement or difficulty of a particular question on a quiz or even the quiz itself, there are a number of guidelines to keep in mind. One is, don't use fancy statistical tools just because they're available. Many times simple descriptive stats, mean, median, and mode, is all you need to tell the story. Don't start getting crazy. It does not add to clarity. And remember, all of this is done, as it says in the bottom of this slide, so that you make better choices in the classroom. Period. End of statement. The fact that something happens twice, 2 points, that doesn't mean that that will happen forever. It's not a trend. You need to be patient and look at over time, are those points trending in the same direction? Was this a fluke? Was this a one-time deal? Or is this something that really has changed the way the students are reacting in my classroom? Having said that, if you can't get really good data, get the data you can. Some data will make some improvement in a decision. No data means you can't make any kind of change in your ability to make better decisions. So we have data now. We've done some analysis of the data, and we have some ideas of what we see in that data, what the data is telling us about what's occurring in the classroom and what's happening with our students. Well, what do I use it for? Well, you use it to make change. Whether it's to improve the curricula. Perhaps a particular lab just is not working. Well, rather than walking over to OCD and saying, this lab sucks, it's bad, we should get rid of it, an opinion, you walk up and say, you know, I have taught this class 3 times, and every time this lab is artificially low. I don't know why they're scoring so poorly, but it seems to be that either we need to add more information into the class or we need to change somehow this particular lab. It's not working in the form it's in now. That opens up the discussion. That allows you to gather more data for research or to use expert opinions around you to make changes in the classroom more effectively. You identify the scheduling issues early so you can fix them. And the bottom line behind all of these changes and all the plans we do in the classroom and the entire reason we're going through all this professional development is to try to help students learn. If we know what we're doing, if we can prove what we're doing is working, then we know the students are learning. The fact that I threw a quiz at them and they threw it back with some answers on it that scored into a certain range doesn't mean any learning actually occurred. It just means that somebody made some marks on a piece of paper. Well, that's it. You've made it through yet another professional development training. Some of the takeaways for this particular one, I know it was somewhat long, is to go ahead and try to identify those sources of relevant data and collect them. Make changes based on what you find from the data. Allow yourself to be open to what the data is telling you. Don't take it personally. If a student says that this course sucks, it doesn't mean that you suck. It means that for whatever reason, they didn't get what they thought they should have gotten out of this class. It's not to say that what they're thinking they should get is accurate, but it's important to know that somewhere there's a disconnect so that we can work on it. If you take the data personally, you're never going to be able to see the truth that lies behind the numbers. Appreciate the time you spent listening to this. I hope you take away something and that you move forward in trying to use data to help you become a better teacher. Thank you, and I hope to see you in another future class.